2023 has come and gone. Another year down, another year older, and another year of consuming hundreds of hours of media content. Today, though, I'd like to take you on a journey of some of my favorite things, some of the best things, the best shows of 2023. Vinland Saga, written by Makoto Yukimura, is an epic historical fiction anime. Set in 1013 AD, Vinland Saga follows the story of the conquering of England by the Danish king Sven, our story predominantly being told from the perspective of Thorfinn, a young Icelandic warrior who watched his father be cut down in front of him by a Welsh mercenary. Season 1 of Vinland Saga follows the story of a young Thorfinn. Thorfinn, who is consumed by anger, vows to serve this man, the man who killed his father, Usher, until the day he can take his revenge and kill him in a duel. Over the next 11 years, throughout the story of Season 1, we see Thorfinn be consumed by his anger and rage. The young boy had become a devastating and violent warrior. Only a teenager, but by this point, Thorfinn had taken hundreds of lives. The young man becoming cold and distant, never so much as smiling. Season 1 of Vinland Saga ends as Thorfinn watches in horror as Usher, the man he dedicated his life to killing, the man who killed his father, and throughout Season 1 has become this almost kind of fucked up replacement father figure, is struck down in front of him by the princeling Canute. This is one of my favorite scenes from Season 1 for just how perfectly it kind of encapsulates the anger and anguish and despair on Thorfinn's face, as the young man watches in horror as the revenge, the thing that he has spent the last 11 years chasing, the thing that he has committed horrible acts in pursuit of, is taken away from him. Season 2 of Vinland Saga picks up on our story a few years later, but the Thorfinn we see is almost unrecognizable. Thorfinn was spared for attempting to kill the king, and instead of losing his head, the young man was sold into indentured servitude. Thorfinn has become a shell of his former self. None would even believe that this quiet, broken man was once a vicious killer. Season 2 of Vinland Saga caught many anime-only fans kind of by surprise for this pretty drastic change of pace and change of tone, and many people were not happy, as it seems like a lot of viewers couldn't understand why Thorfinn was no longer this same ultra-Viking violent warrior that we saw in Season 1. Author Yukimura would even come out and apologize to readers and viewers for making these changes, but insisted he found it impossible for the series and the story to return to these violent roots. He then clapped back like an absolute savage. I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he said, if you want to go watch violence, go watch Attack on Titan. You see, despite people complaining about the change of pace and the lack of violence in Season 2, Season 2 is still extremely violent. But it's really the way that our author Yukimura uses this violence in Season 2 that dramatically shifts the tone of the story. The second season of Vinland Saga largely follows Thorfinn's internal struggles. Thorfinn is traumatized by his actions from his previous life, his young life as a Viking warrior. Throughout this season, we see that Thorfinn is plagued by nightmares, plagued by the souls of those he has taken throughout his young life, the many people he has killed. The story does an amazing job juxtaposing the fantasy of the Viking warrior that many of the common folk we see hold within this world with the actual bloody, violent, and traumatic reality of the Viking man. There was a lot of really good anime that came out in 2023, but Vinland Saga Season 2, for me, is easily the best anime to come out this year. To me, this season really embodies the kind of brilliance of manga and anime in an art form. The story is amazing, the soundtrack is amazing, the voice act is amazing. To me, it is as equally beautiful as it is to look at, as it is terrifying, and most impressive of all, I think, is the story's ability to really dive into the human psyche and make the audience, well, feel things. If somehow you can watch Season 2 of Vinland Saga and not come away feeling some very strong emotions, then you're a fucking psychopath. Critical Role, everyone's favorite nerdy-ass voice actors who stream Dungeons & Dragons, have had a pretty crazy 2023. As their primary show, Critical Role Campaign 3 hit its really first major climax this year. Also, they began the year with the release of their second season of their animated series, Legend of Vox Machina, which I freaking loved. However, we're not talking about either of those. Instead, we are talking about Critical Role's new tabletop role-playing system, and specifically their accompanying show, Candela Obscura. Candela Obscura is basically like the Critical Role's team's take on Call of Cthulhu. It is a hardcore investigative eldritch horror-esque tabletop RPG where our party of characters, known as a circle, investigate strange occult-like phenomena and eldritch horrors in a turn-of-the-century inspired world. Critical Role's new Candela Obscura show ran for 3 chapters, each chapters being 3 episodes long and featuring a different game master with a different accompanying cast of characters and actors. Now, right now, you might be like, Fraud, what the fuck? Why would I watch people play like a tabletop role-playing game? That's weird and super nerdy and cringe. Which I would ask you, do you watch movies? Or perhaps maybe you've seen a play or a musical? I mean, do Zoomers even like watch or know what plays or musicals are? Do they still have those in schools? Now imagine the amazingness of a movie or a play, sprinkle in a little improv acting, and then add Brennan Lee Mulligan plus terrifying Call of Cthulhu shenanigans, and you get Candela Obscura. Imagine for a second you're watching a group of really talented actors do like an improv session of like the X-Files or the Twilight Zone. Yeah, that's what Candela Obscura is. The really nice thing about this show, especially when you compare it to like other D&D or like tabletop role-playing-esque shows, is this show is extremely approachable. Each chapter has only 3 episodes. In total, each of them is around like 4 to 6 hours, which is short for a Dungeons & Dragons like tabletop role-playing game show. And you could watch them in whatever order you want, as each of these stories are independent from one another. Personally, my favorite is Chapter 2, The Circle of Needle and Thread. All of the chapters are good, but specifically Chapter 2 with this cast of Movies Carousel, Zara Faisal, Marisha Ray, Travis Willingham, and my boy, the beautiful Brennan Lee Mulligan. These guys just really hit it out of the park. All of them gave 100% of their acting talent in these episodes, and it comes together for, honestly, like one of the best improv performances that I've probably ever seen, like ever.
My baby boy, Sean. I miss you so. Yeah, Annie Beatrix tells me that you're still doing what you do best. Killing those who are different from you simply because you're told to. Following orders to eradicate people with families and loved ones, then letting those same people you choose to obey kill your brothers. And now I am here, in this wretched place, because of you, Sean. Because you didn't look out for our family. You let us down, and I cannot forgive you for that. With all my love, Mom.
Whether you like tabletop role-playing game or not, or maybe you've just never watched a tabletop role-playing game in a show like this, I highly recommend giving Candela Obscura a chance. If you are a fan of like the spooky, the macabre, something like Call of Cthulhu-esque, I think that you will like this show, irregardless if you've ever watched a tabletop RPG show or if you even know what tabletop role-playing games are. Sticking in this kind of tabletop role-playing game vein, I couldn't talk about 2023 and the best things from 2023 without mentioning, in my opinion, the best game to come out this year, Larian Studios' Baldurs Gate 3. Baldurs Gate 3 is one of the most like immersive and interactive role-playing games I've probably ever played ever. And out of the many Dungeons & Dragons inspired video games out there that have come out across the many years, I don't think any have come closer to replicating really the magic of like playing Dungeons & Dragons other than like Baldur's Gate 3. The level of freedom and choice in this game is truly mind-breaking. It's nearly impossible to describe all of the little ways you can interact in this world, like the way your character can interact mechanically with the environment, or just the sheer amount of story divergence and narrative reactivity that happens throughout your gameplay of this story. Your choices very much do matter in this game, and I can basically guarantee that no two playthroughs of Baldur's Gate 3 will be the same at all. I think Super Eyepatch Wolf tells a really good anecdote which kind of sums up and captures the sheer insanity of the story diversity of this game. I really highly recommend you check out his video here. The anecdote starts at around the 19-minute mark in his favorite things of 2023 video. To me, Baldur's Gate 3 is easily the game of the year. I give it a fat 9.4 out of 10. Regardless if you are a Dungeons & Dragons nerd or not, this game is really just amazingly a fun experience that I think that everyone should have. There's so many different ways to enjoy this game that I really think that people from all walks of life can play Baldur's Gate 3 and have a ton of fun. And to top it all off, it has one of my favorite soundtracks of any video game ever. I mean, how can you not feel anything but immersed exploring this fantasy world with these sweet, soft sounds of Down by the River ringing in your ear? Netflix over the last few years has really been pushing the bar with its Netflix originals. Specifically, we're talking about one of my favorite spooky shows from 2023, Netflix Fall of the House of Usher. Fall of the House of Usher is a classic Mike Flanagan psychological horror drama which follows the downfall of the House of Usher, a rich and eccentric business tycoon family. It is a story of greed and evil, and I absolutely love it. In many ways, The Fall of the House of Usher is an homage to Edgar Allan Poe, lots of references to the Raven in this show. At times, some of the twists and turns in the story are a little bit predictable, but I don't think that this takes anything away from the suspense and the horrors unfolding before your eyes, as it becomes really apparent from the beginning of this show that Fall of the House of Usher will not have a happy ending. Personally, I really enjoyed this show. Like many other Mike Flanagan works, it's an end-to-end story that kind of shifts perspectives between two really primary perspectives, in this case the present, which follows a conversation between the patriarch of the family, Roderick Usher, and the man investigating him, Auguste Dupin, and the stories of the past leading up to this moment. Oh yeah, it also features an awesome performance by Mark Hamill as Arthur Pym, the Usher family lawyer. It really never ceases to amaze me just how good Mark Hamill continues to be. Continuing on with another Netflix original, and the series which really took me probably most by surprise this year, Blue Eye Samurai. Blue Eye Samurai follows the story of Mizu, a samurai who is hunting the 4 white men who illegally reside in Edo-era Japan, one of them being Mizu's father. I've said this before in my other 2 Blue Eye Samurai videos, but this show somehow manages to capture the sheer beauty of Edo-era Japan and then juxtapose it with the brutal, violent, cold reality of its social order. And I think that I can really best sum it up by playing you the opening of my Genius of Blue Eye Samurai video. A young samurai stammers to their feet. Before them stands a long, dark corridor. At the end of the corridor stands a giant of a man. The samurai slowly walks forward, looking from left to right. Flanking the corridor stands great wooden cages. Inside them were people. In the darkness of the cage, the samurai saw the burning red eyes of a man, a look of shock coming across the samurai's face, their blue eyes sparkling in contrast to the burning red. Another man appears at the bars of the cage. The samurai turns as the man screams, transforming himself into a vampiric, ghoul-like creature, the room filling with shrieks as within the cages more of these creatures appear, writhing and reaching, desperately trying to claw the samurai. The giant man at the end of the hallway pulls a lever, releasing the creatures from their cage. They surround the blue-eyed samurai, shrieking and gnashing their teeth, hungry for flesh, for blood. The lights begin to flicker, as the creatures charge, lashing out at the young samurai. The samurai's bright blue eyes harden, their face covered in blood as they let out a shrieking battle cry. The hum of steel pierces the air, the slicing of flesh, the screams of pain, the smell of death, as the samurai stands covered in blood, victorious. To our horror, we see not the tattered bodies of those ghoulish creatures, but the remains of butchered men and women. Blue Eye Samurai somehow manages to blend like intense and epic fight scenes and animation with a deep multi-layered story filled with diverse and fully fleshed out characters, themes of acceptance, racism, and bigotry. Many themes that a lot of works of animation would probably never touch with like a 10-foot pole, and let alone execute them as well as Blue Eye Samurai manages to do. To me, Blue Eye Samurai is probably my favorite piece of media from 2023, probably because I never would have expected this show to be as good as it was, in my opinion. If you have not seen this show, please go and watch it. If, like me, you are a child of the 90s, then you might have also been obsessed with a little graphic novel that came out in the early 2000s called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Surprisingly, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the live adaptation movie, which came out in 2010, is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Whether that's because I had a massive crush on Ramona Flowers, or I was just an angsty high school kid when this movie came out, who knows? So you can imagine then my surprise and excitement when I saw that Netflix was releasing a rebuild to the Scott Pilgrim story in Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. And good God, does this show visually look absolutely amazing. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off shifts the perspective from Scott fighting Ramona's evil exes to Ramona as a character and her growth as a person in her attempt to come to terms with her own past. And the result is a story which embodies the original Scott Pilgrim story, but in a more emotional and empathetic way. This shift in perspective also allows a lot more of our side characters to really come to the forefront of our story. For instance, like young Neil, Wallace Wells, and Lucas Lee, all characters who I found myself loving even more after watching this show. At the end of the day, I'm not too surprised that I love this show, as I am a Scott Pilgrim fan, and yes, I still have a crush on Ramona. It only felt right to end an episode on the year of 2023 with the end of an era, the end of an icon, the end of Attack on Titan. I feel like at this point, there's very few people in the world who aren't at least like somewhat familiar or have heard of Attack on Titan. In my opinion, Attack on Titan Shingeki no Kyojin is really the main anime responsible for shaping the modern shonen and anime landscape that we are in right now. As since its first airing in April 2013, anime has seen a massive rise in popularity up to now in 2023. As in this graph right here, we see anime revenues overseas explode from 2013 onward. You see, for many people, the idea of anime was either like a subculture, a subgenre for nerds, or it was just cartoons that we grew up watching as a chunk of Saturday morning cartoons from the late 90s and early 2000s. Were basically just English dubbed anime, whether it's Dragon Ball Z to Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh! There's so many of them. But to see this genre grow from a small nerdy subculture to the mainstream behemoth that it has become today is absolutely insane, and I think a lot of it can be credited to Attack on Titan. After 10 years, Attack on Titan has finally come to an end with its two-part Attack on Titan The End special, and though it took way too long for this to finally be released, I will say it's goddamn amazing. Probably most of all in the way that it translates the sheer horror and brutality of the final chapters of this story into the anime screen. I don't really want to get into like a ton of depth of spoilers in this video. If you want to see my full thoughts on the ending of Attack on Titan, you can check out this video here. We've talked about Attack on Titan a lot on this channel throughout the last few years. To me, it really just didn't seem right to not include the ending of Attack on Titan in a video encapsulating the best things of 2023, as in many ways to me, the ending of Attack on Titan is the ending of an era in anime. And yes, guys, this was a list of some of my favorite things from 2023. Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. What were some of your favorite works of media and favorite things in 2023? If you did enjoy the video or learn something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as your engagement on these videos helps to put them into the algorithm and helps to put eyes on the channel and helps us to grow. I just really want to give a big thank you to everyone who watches my videos, whether you watch me rant about random works of media that I love, or Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe just random internet drama. I just want to say a big thank you to all my old viewers and all my new. I first started this channel because it was something that I had always dreamed of doing, but for the longest time, I had been told by those people around me that it was stupid, and I never should. To me, starting this channel is one of the best things that's ever happened to me, as really, for the first time in my life, I feel like I have a way to be creative and to use these kind of creative juices that run in my mind, and really to get to share a lot of the things that I love with other people out there. And at the end of the day, I just want to say thank you so much for watching the videos, as they really does mean a lot to me. As always, guys, I hope to see you in the next one. Drink your water, hug your mother. Until next time, peace, love, out.
Before Facebook and bullshit rap, there was a time when MCs used to bust sick track. Nah, don't get mad, I'm not saying you can't spit. Somewhere you wasn't born in, somewhere you was kids. I was 15.